Okay, welcome to this talk on front-rounded vowels in the Tonda branch of the Yam family. Here's my outline. Basically, after a bit of intro on front-rounded vowels, I'll talk about them cross-linguistically and about their emergence cross-linguistically, and then about them in the Yam languages and about their emergence in the Yam languages. And I'll wrap up with some conclusions. So before we go into this, I'll quickly play to you 4 tokens of these front-rounded vowels, the high front-rounded vowel and the mid front-rounded vowel. So here's one of the high, U. Susunbellen. Quatuur. Döhler. Sesambem. So those are examples come from my console data. So we'll talk about U and Ö. So here's the vowel chart with which most of you will be familiar. Now, roundedness is often associated with high back vowels and not with high front vowels. Now, this has a reason in articulatory perspective, but also an acoustic perspective. So the rounding involves drawing the corners of one's lips together and protruding the lips. This is obviously easier done when the tongue is positioned high as opposed to positioned low. So from an acoustic perspective, lip rounding is often associated with back vowels because it reinforces the low-pitched acoustic overtones, which are typical for back vowels. So from that perspective, front rounded vowels are a bit odd. And when we look into the World Atlas of Language Structures here, we see that they occur only in a minority of languages. So the sample here is 562, and in 30 odd languages, we find front rounded vowels shown in different colors. And we can clearly see that this is the phenomenon of Eurasia and South Asia. Outside of this larger area, we find them very scattered. So they occur in Eurasia in Uralic languages, in Altaic languages, in Sino-Tibetan, in Germanic, and in Romance languages. In the Pacific, they occur in the vowel sample only in 3 languages. 2 of them are Oceanic, shown in the east. 1 of them is Australian. We may add from other data that they occur in New Guinea in Abiu-Dumut languages, in Kombai, Korowai, Agu, and Madobo, where Ruth Wester reconstructs them back to the proto-language, and Loudons de Vries also agrees that they should be reconstructed to the even larger unit, Proto-Greater Abiu. In this talk, I'll add some data from the Tonda subgroup of the Yan family. So if we amend the walls map here, we can include a few more dots on the map. Okay, how did front-rounded vowels emerge? So in Germanic, famously, they come from umlaut processes, which means that an U was drawn forward to become an Ü, and if the following syllable contained a front vowel like I. So this was often the case with derivational inflection suffixes. For example, is one of the plural suffixes in Germanic. So that's where German Fuß versus plural Füße and English foot versus feet originate. In Finno-Ugric and Turkic languages, we find processes of vowel harmony which are still very much productive in, for example, Hungarian or Turkish. I'll show you some examples below here. I won't go too much into detail. We may also find front-rounded vowels emerging as part of a chain shift. So the fronting of U to Ü in French was either caused by or it caused also the change from O to U. So tu comes from Latin tu, and the plural form vu comes from Latin vo, vos. And similar process is found in Azorian Portuguese. I'll skip over this for the sake of time. Front-rounded vowels could also emerge as a different kind of assimilation. They can be fronted in the presence of another consonant, which is a front consonant. So here in Cantonese, we have U becoming Ü, but only if the original syllable was Ut. So Ut becomes Ut and then the T is lost, and we are left with Ü. So as an intermediate summary, we may say that front-rounded vowels emerge under the influence of something else. So this may be a vowel harmony, a chain shift, might be adjacent consonants. We can also say that front-rounded vowel phonemes occur in languages which have a larger vowel system. And we can certainly say that they usually occur in systems which also have the unrounded counterparts. So often we find that front-rounded vowels emerge from something else, but rarely they are reconstructed. So the Argudumit example might be is an exception to this. So with this in mind, I will take you to the to southern New Guinea, to the Yam languages, which you can see on this map here. The Yam family consists of 3 sub-branches. You have Nambu languages in the west and the east. You have in the center, you have Tonda languages, and in the north, you have a family-level isolate, Yei, that forms its own branch. I'll be mostly talking about languages in the center of this map here, and the language that I worked on is Komso, spoken here. Now, a little bit on the data. This goes back to a work on reconstructing the Proto-Yam phonological system together with Matt Carroll and Nick Evans. And we work here with word list data that you can find in our Yam Finder database. It includes word list data for 26 languages, and a lot of people have contributed data to this. I have been granted access to a couple of unpublished sources that include dictionaries of Nimbo and Namat by Eric Kashima and Jeff Siegel, an orthography and grammar of Aramba by the Bouveys, a dictionary of Wera by Risto Sasa, and there are a couple of published sources like the Nen dictionary by Nick and my own work on Komso. And of course, there's a lot of field note data. Okay, so first I'll talk about the front-rounded, wait a second. First I'll talk about the high front-rounded vowel Ü, which is attested in the languages here that are colored in purple on the map. So we find it in the Nambu branch only in the languages that are shown here, Nama and Namat. They are very close sisters, and in Ndre. And we find the Ü in Aramba in the north, in the Tonda branch, and in the languages that I call the Eastern Tonda dialect chain. So those are the languages here, Anta, Wore, Wera, Koma, Komso, and in the south, Kansa. It's not attested in the other Tonda languages, or it's very sporadically attested in wordless data in Wata and a little bit in Rainbow, but it's practically not there. As for the mid-front rounded vowel Ö, the story is a bit more complicated, and we find it only in Nama and Namat, and I didn't find it in the wordless data on Ndre, but in Ndre we have very small data. It's part of the description for Aramba in the north. It is in my own data, it's attested in Eastern Tonda, so all of these ones. I'm not entirely certain about Kansa, though, I have to say. I'll explain in a minute why the mid-front Ö is a bit more complicated. So with that in mind, we can say that front-rounded vowels occur in both, on 2 of the 3 branches of the Yam family, in Nambu branch and in the Tonda branch, but in adjacent areas. So if we ask ourselves, did they develop independently, or can we reconstruct it, or is it just due to contact? As a working hypothesis, at the moment, I would say this is a contact phenomena in the Nambu languages. How did front-rounded vowels develop in the Tonda branch? So it's the question for the rest of this talk. Okay, and I'll start with some observation from my Komso data on the mid-front rounded vowel Ö, which is pretty rare in the lexicon. So in a dictionary with 1800 entries, we only find 30 lexemes that contain Ö. And more disturbingly, we don't find minimal pairs with its sort of logical neighbors, E, the front unrounded, and O, the back rounded mid-vowel. So we may say, is Ö just an allophone and there's some vowel harmony or assimilation going on? Well, so far I've always said no, this is not the case because I could not establish a conditioning environment. But we do find morphophonemic processes when we add the emphatic enclitic where. So for example, we find the fronting of o. So in this example, kar means village, fo is the allative to the village, and where is the emphatic. So if I want to say really to the village, it comes out not as kar fo where, but as kar fo where with the fronting. And same goes with rounding of e. So this word tafe means old with the emphatic where. It doesn't come out as tafe where, but as tafo where. Okay, second observation, front-rounded vowels rarely occur after velar consonants. So velar consonants in Konto include stops and prenatalized stops, labialized stops and prenatalized labialized stops, and the nasal. So we rarely find, or we almost do not find words that are q or contain q or ke, but they do occur, of course, after bilabial alveolar, palatal alveolar consonants. So we find words like food, tufer, and turen. So we could say, okay, this is just assimilation of place caused by the adjacent consonant. But of course, we find a lot of back vowels after front consonants, like food or like boon. So that's probably not a good explanation. And in fact, the opposite is true. As I show you here, there's a process of palatalization. So it's the consonant that changes place of articulation according to whether the following vowel is front or back. So we see this in Eastern Tonda, and this is one of the sound changes that unites Eastern Tonda as a group within the Tonda sub-branch. So you see tokens, for example, the first word, the first line is a word for a woman after giving birth. So the Konto term here is brachi with a ch. The wore is brasi, kansa is brochi. But if we look further west to other Tonda languages, it's broki with a bila, k. And if we look into the Nambu branch, we find the cognate in nama, it's brake, also with a bila. So the point of this table is to show that there's palatalization that unites several languages of the Eastern Tonda dialect chain. There are some exceptions down here. As you can see with Kansa and Bore, they are spoken more to the west in this dialect chain, so they are more in contact with the Western Tonda languages, which do not have palatalized. You see that this is also the case for velars in the word for one down here. So we have ngambi with a velar nasal. In Wore and Konto, Wera, and Anta, we have nambi with an alveolar nasal. And in Nama and all other Nambu languages, initial velars were lost. Okay, so this is palatalization. I'll take you to another correspondence set before I'll connect all of this to front-rounded vowels. So there's a correspondence of bilabial to labialized velars. So we find bilabials in Tonda languages further in the west, and labialized velars in Eastern Tonda. So languages spoken, Tonda languages further to the west, like in Blafe and Renmo, or also Walspa, they have the word for nest is in bel or bes, whereas in Konto it's in wef. The word for sick is big, whereas in Konto or Eastern Tonda it's quick. Yeah, and the same goes here for light or white. Sometimes it's braya, bayan, and in Eastern Tonda it's kwayan. So the correspondence is between bilabials and labialized velars. Okay, in our reconstruction work of peripherals, so of the sounds that are spoken in front of the mouth and the very back of the mouth, in our reconstruction with Matt and Nick, we have reconstructed the Proto-Yam phonemes kwe and ngwe, and we found some interesting developments in this. So down here in this table, which you probably can't see, I can zoom in a little bit. We reconstruct the word centipede, which stretches across the whole family, which is something probably the only lexeme that we find that we can reconstruct or we've tested in all members. So I'll zoom in a little bit here and tell you that this kwe phoneme in the Nambu branch. So those are the gray languages in the left here. And in the Nambu branch, kwe developed changed into k. So the labialized part was lost. So, for example, in the reflex is kamo. In Eastern Tonda, we have kwe that goes to k and then goes to che. So the cognate for the word for centipede has a che in front. In other languages of the Tonda branch, they don't form a dialect chain, but I call them the Western Tonda languages. Kwe goes to b or to mb. So in Golombu, the language that Matt works on, the reflex is bum. And finally, in Ye, kwe goes to ku. There are many exceptions. A few exceptions, I should say, not many. So in the Nambu language, Dre, we do not find kwe going to k, but we find it going to gu. But then Dre is spoken next door to the language Aramba, and the form gum, the reflex gum, is the same in both. Somewhat confusingly, the Eastern Tonda language Kansa has basically retained the original reconstruction and did not undergo these changes here, which Komso did. And for the Western Tonda languages, there is Ngarala, which has a co-articulated wum or bum. Okay, so how does this connect to front-rounded vowels? So here I show you palatalization again in Eastern Tonda, but this time the tokens involve or the lexemes involve front-rounded vowels. And I also show you data on Aramba, spoken in the north, and then I chose Renmo as a representative of languages, of Tonda languages spoken further in the west. So what we see here is basically that in our little sequence that I showed you before, let me skip back a second, of kwe going to k, going to something palatal, che or se or something of this kind. In our sequence, Aramba has sort of stopped halfway. So here, kwe has gone to g. We can see the centipede word, grün, of the word for smoke, grün. So the cognate and Komso for this are chum and churen. So obviously there's a bit of metathesis going on here. Okay, so what I'm trying to say in ordering those changes, first what must have happened is that the kwe has gone to become a q or a q, so a vila that has lost labialization, but that has preserved labialization in the vowel, which now is a front-rounded vowel. And then in the second step, we have palatalization that kicks in. It doesn't occur everywhere here. As you can see, that if you accept, there's some exceptions in Wode, Kansa, Khmer, but in the other Eastern Tonda languages, that explanation seems to work. Okay. So in the scenario that I'm putting forward here, Western Tonda languages like Mplafe, Renmo, and Wasta have had de-velarization. So kwe becomes b, and in some languages, the vela feature has spread on the following vowel. So kwe becomes bu or bu. In Aramba, we have delabialization, so kwe becomes k, and the rounding feature was spread on the following vowel. So kwe becomes ku. And in Eastern Tonda, this has had one more step, that the rounded front vowel triggered palatalization. So ku becomes chu. So as a conclusion, I want to say I've shown you that they occur, front-rounded vowels occur in two sub-branches of the family. As a working hypothesis, I would say at the moment that this is a contact effect in the Nambu branch, because it's only found in the languages that are in close contact with Tonda languages. In the Tonda branch, the Eastern Tonda group and Aramba have had one of the sources of the high front-rounded vowel was the labialization of velar consonants, or the delabialization. Anyway, so from the synchronic data, things become a bit more complicated, and we can say for Comto, at least vowel harmony might have played a role as well. So I'd like to close with a question to you. Do you know about other languages in the Pacific that do have front-rounded vowels, and do you know about how they emerge? And with that, I'll say thank you on Comto Kapar Ngant Möwe. And I'm looking forward to your comments.